For many people, a goal will be to transform a lesson or a workshop or seminar that they are doing in an in-person setting to an online learning experience. In this video, we're going to talk through some considerations for making that leap and to help make that transformation a successful and efficient process. Now, there are a few different things that are important when you're teaching online versus in person, and we're going to talk about three of those here. The first is talking about planning. So when you're in an in-person setting, sometimes you may be able to walk in a classroom and be able to talk and deliver, especially if you know the content well, with very minimal need for planning. Well, when you're working online and delivering materials that way, planning is a much more important process in ensuring that the materials are successfully delivered and that it reaches the learning goal that you need it to reach. And so planning is a key step in making the transformation from online to in-person to online delivery rather. The other component there is technology. So technology, obviously online is using internet-enabled technologies to deliver content and interaction. And so when you're working through that, you want to make sure that the planning is in place, but also that the technology supports the delivery that you're aiming to make there as well. So technology plays a key component in that process as well. And then finally, we have to think a lot about the types of interactions that you're wanting to create. So for instance, just because you do something in a classroom from an interaction standpoint, maybe asking a group of people questions or asking that they work in groups at a table, doesn't necessarily mean that same interaction is going to translate completely into the online environment. We may have to approach that slightly differently. And so thinking about the types of interactions that you want to create are really important when you think about migrating from an in-person classroom-based or workshop-based learning experience into an online learning experience as well. Now, making the transition and transformation is pretty important. So there's a few things to kind of keep in mind. First of all, what works in a classroom does not necessarily work online. So this sometimes requires us to really rethink what we're doing from a learning standpoint and the strategies that we use to engage people in that way. Second, information that you deliver does not equal learning. So just because you're delivering a lot of information and you're presenting and sharing different ideas and content does not necessarily mean that learning is happening. And so what we have to do is really approach this from a learning environment standpoint in terms of providing people activities, providing them opportunities to really develop the knowledge and skills and help them learn from that standpoint. So we can't just deliver information to people. There's more to it than that. And then finally, your online lesson, that experience is part of a larger learning environment. So just because you're delivering content and you're creating interactions there are other things that can work into that learning environment. And we have a real opportunity to be able to engage people in that way. So these three things, and when you're making that transformation, are really some key things to consider in that process. So what does that transformation process look like? Well, the first thing that we want to do is really focus what we want to teach, right? We sometimes will have a lesson and we want to include all types of information. Focus is so important when it comes to really developing and designing effective online learning. So we're going to focus that process. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to create a plan. We're going to know what we're going to deliver, and we're going to create a plan to help learners get to that direction. So that planning is a key process when it comes to understanding the media and the technology and things like that we need to engage. Third, we're going to build it. So we're going to build the materials. We're going to put it in an online platform. We're going to deliver it in a webinar system, whatever it may be. But we're going to focus on quality and building the materials. And then finally, we're going to launch it. So when we actually deliver it to learners, it may be publishing our lesson. It may be delivering the webinar, but that launch phase is a key process there. And the thing is that this is a cycle, because once you launch it, you're going to learn some things that you may want to refine as well. And so when you're thinking about the process that you might go through to make that transformation from in-person to online, you want to focus your ideas, create a plan, build the materials, and launch it. Those are the 4 steps that we're going to work through in this course and that are so important in the online learning context. The other thing I want to share with you here is we're going to talk about the work that we do in terms of planning using 5 building blocks of online teaching. So these are information, dialogue, feedback, practice, and evidence. And so I'm going to talk through each of these real quickly, but you can think about when you're planning a lesson, you can use these 5 building blocks to organize the various components that would go into that, both from a live online lesson, but also an on-demand lesson as well. So information would be really information you give to people. It could be a reading, a video, it could be a presentation that is delivered, but that it's you're essentially giving people the content or the information that is there. Dialogue is where we interact and engage with one another. So for instance, if I'm the instructor, I might have a dialogue with a learner about a question that they may have. I may encourage learners to interact with one another in the chat area, so it's a learner to learner type interaction. I might also encourage people to reflect, and they could have dialogue with themselves, really intrapersonal dialogue there, reflecting of how what they're learning might mean to them. And so we essentially have those three kind of varieties of dialogue going on there. Feedback is something where I give some judgment or some guidance to someone else based on maybe an exercise that they've done, and so I'm giving them feedback. You know, you did good, or you didn't do so good in this. You know, try doing this next time. I'm helping them build competency and skill through feedback. Practice is giving people opportunity to build those skills. So this is, you might, if you're working towards a certain exercise, giving people some steps along the way to try different steps or procedures in moving to them, getting to the final activity. And then that final activity is really what we call evidence of learning. It's the thing that you can proverbially hold in your hand that shows that learning has happened. And so that evidence of learning is something we want to work people to. That's the goal or the end result of that learning experience. So when we go throughout our course in teaching online, we're going to be talking about the planning and delivery in using these 5 building blocks of information, dialogue, feedback, practice, and evidence, and you'll be able to use these as a tool for planning and facilitating those experiences.